A soft hum of tension fills the room as the camera settles on Keisha's face, eyes burning with a depth forged by years of unspoken truths. She leans forward, voice steady but heavy with emotion. She begins, "If a woman wants to get intimate, she'll always say this." But those words carry more than desire, they carry memory, resistance, pride. In the quiet weight of her tone, the history of Black womanhood pulses, long-endured silences, stolen dignity, and the insistent pursuit of self-honoring intimacy in a world that too often denies it. Keisha grew up in a neighborhood where whispers shaped boundaries. She learned early that speaking desire, female desire, Black desire, came wrapped in fear. The trauma of her mother's heartbreak, the judgment of elders who warned of tongues wagging, the overshadowing weight of stereotypes, all these built walls around her voice. She was taught that to desire openly was to invite danger, to tempt punishment. But here she was, breaking that pattern, teaching a new generation. As she says the phrase, simple words, carefully chosen, she is asserting something radical: I trust you. Maybe she says it at dusk, fingers grazing the rim of a glass, or at dawn, rubbing gentle circles at the nape of your neck. It's not a casual remark. It is consent, invitation, affirmation. And yet it is so much more, it is courage. In that utterance exists the work of negating past wounds, re-establishing dignity, reclaiming joy. The camera holds on her, capturing how her chest rises and falls, how her throat moves, how her eyes search for reciprocity. This is not a command. It is an opening, offered after battles waged deep inside. We shift to scenes of community, a church basement meeting, mothers teaching daughters how to speak boundaries and how to ask for what they need. An older woman's voiceover recalls her mother telling her, "You don't beg. You don't lower. You speak." That generational wisdom underscores the narrative. When Keisha or another woman says the phrase, it's an echo of that lineage, women who trembled and then learned to claim their presence. They learned to name their desire, not as property, but as power. The story threads through moments. At the office, Fatima adjusts her hijab, fixing her posture, gathering her resolve. She meets a colleague's gaze and says, softly, but in a tone that leaves no doubt, "When I'm ready, I'll let you know." In uttering her boundary, she also implicitly states her desire. She is not refusing coldly, she is claiming timing, choice, dignity. Watching her, we realize that the same phrase, spoken by a Black woman in a world shaped by racism and sexism, carries layers of psychological significance. There is self-respect, there is learned caution. There is a fierce insistence: I decide when intimacy happens. We see a young man, Marcus, listening quietly. He has seen friends brag of taking what they want, dismissing women's words as games, tests, mere coy strategies. But watching Fatima and Keisha, he learns, when she says the phrase, she means it. Respect it. Honor it. That moment ripples outward. It speaks not only to individual consent, but to community culture, how we honor women's voices, how we dismantle toxic myths about coercion and male bravado. When a Black woman says the words, she isn't playing. She is stating, a line in sand, a statement of worth, a claim to her own narrative. We move to Keisha's earlier years, teenage bedroom door closed. She writes in her journal about boys who pressured, who misheard silence as yes. She scribbles, "I want someone to just let me say it." It is the phrase she wants to say when she is ready. And when that time comes, she does. There is sorrow in her memory, but also triumph. She is telling her past, this is how you survive. This is how you reclaim emotional space, reclaim your body, reclaim your story in dignified, powerful words. Narration overlaps this memory. If a woman wants intimacy, she'll always say this. Not because she's playing games, not to test you, but to affirm, she is choosing you. Notice the shift, from silence as consent to words as real permission. She is not an enigma to decipher, she is a person to listen to. That practice of listening, in a context where Black women's voices have been diminished, becomes an act of justice. Every syllable is evidence of her agency. In the middle of the narrative we cut to a montage, Black women in varied spaces, classrooms, boardrooms, front porches, repeating variations of the phrase, "Let me know when you're ready and I'll be here. When I'm comfortable, I'll tell you. I'm open when that time comes." We hear voiceovers describing the psychology behind it. When boundaries are respected, trust grows. When words are heard, dignity blooms. They talk about internalized stereotypes, learned self-protective silence, and the brave decision to speak anyway. And we see the emotional release, the relief in a woman's expression when her partner pauses, acknowledges her words, shows respect. Then we return to Keisha in present day, older, wiser. She stands at a podium in a community hall addressing young Black women. Her opening sentence, "You will always say this if you mean it." She holds the room in silence. She unpacks that simple phrase as a tool of self-preservation and self-worth. She reminds them, you deserve to be understood. You deserve someone to wait. You deserve someone who honors your voice. She recounts stories of women who rushed, who hid their truth, and who lost parts of themselves in the process, only to rebuild stronger when they learned to speak their boundaries clearly. As Keisha speaks, a daughter in the back rows watches her mother's words play out in real time. Maybe that girl is young now, maybe she is older later, but she hears, desire is not shame. Saying I'm ready when I'm ready is not coy. It is honest. It is revolutionary. It is the voice of a woman determined to root her identity in self-respect, not in anyone else's timeline. The emotional weight deepens when Keisha shares a story of heartbreak turned into empowerment. She speaks of a relationship where the man ignored her phrases, the times she said quietly, gently, "When I'm ready," and forced intimacy anyway. She felt violated not only physically but spiritually. In the silence that followed, she felt erased. Yet from that pain came purpose. She chose therapy, she chose art, she chose community activism. The phrase she had once feared speaking became her mantra, used, honored, crucible forged. She rebuilds her self-esteem on it, and now uses it to teach others. This section ends as Keisha steps into evening light beyond the building. She breathes in the dusk, eyes steady. The phrase lingers in the air. Not as a trick, not as a test, it's a declaration, I am here, speaking my truth. I'm choosing you. Now it's your turn to prove your worth. The narrative pauses, and with that pause comes tension. The audience holds their breath, connecting with her pride, with her courage, with the knowledge that her voice matters, and they must listen. The camera pulls back to reveal other women approaching Keisha, drawing strength from her presence. We hear their separate voices, overlaid in counterpoint, "When I'm ready, I'll tell you. If I say this, it's real. That is my line, my truth, my dignity." Each voice tugs a thread in a shared tapestry, woven from struggle and resilience, dignity and choice. We cut to a kitchen table midday. Sandra, a single mother of two, pours tea as she retells her own version of the phrase. She had spent years feeling pressured, a steady stream of men who saw her silence as yes, her politeness as permission. But she learned. Politeness is not consent. So she crafted a rhythm, I'm not ready yet, but when I am, I'll say it. That phrase became her litmus test. It saved her from unwanted advances. It taught her children by example about boundaries, respect, and self-respect. She recounts how her eldest daughter looked at her with new understanding when she heard her say it, as if passing down that mother-daughter code of dignity. The narrative then returns to the broader theme, psychological truth behind this behavior. A gentle, professional narration guides us. The brain encodes boundaries deeply. When women say, when I'm ready, they're doing an existential computation, risk assessment of safety, trust, emotional readiness. It's not slow. It's precise. It's life-saving. When respected, intimacy becomes a space of healing and pride. When ignored, trauma compounds. There is trauma embedded in every unwanted push. So the phrase is not mere words. It is a boundary-wound dressing, a shield, a signal that must be met with honor. Cut to a quiet evening scene, Tasha and her partner seated on a porch swing. She reaches for his hand and says softly, I want to, but I'll tell you when I'm ready. He listens, breathes, nods. They stay silent a long moment, the night air thick. His pause becomes the space she needs. And later, when the time comes, her request arrives not as hesitation but as confident invitation. The intimacy that follows, gentle, respectful, mutual, feels richer. The narration reminds, respect multiplies connection. A relationship built on honor is rooted in justice, not just chemistry. We revisit Keisha, now back at her podium, describing these scenes as proof. She talks of dignity restored when women reclaim the language of consent. She speaks of communities transformed when men taught themselves to wait, to listen, to internalize women's words as law. She cites generational change. Mothers teaching daughters not only to speak but to expect men who listen. Fathers teaching sons to hear words not guess them. Community healers guiding circles where the phrase becomes teaching tool, helping survivors reclaim power.